Back to Harbaugh, Republican House candidate Rick Barber of Alabama came out with an ad earlier this month that got a lot of buzz. The spot begins partway through an imagined meeting with founding fathers Sam Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington.
And I would impeach him. And if that's not enough, some of you men own taverns. Sam, you are a brewer. Mr. President, a distiller. You know how tough it is to run a small business without a tyrannical government on your back. Today, we have an internal revenue service that enforces what they call a progressive income tax. You'll love this. Every year, if not every quarter, we're basically required to spy on ourselves, report what we earn, who we hire and fire, with an all-powerful separate court system. Without representation, they can increase taxes, add costly regulation, or perform malicious audits. Now, this same IRS is going to force us to buy health insurance, cram it down our throats, or else. Now, I took an oath to defend that with my life. Now, I can't stand by while these evils are perpetrated. You gentlemen revolted over a T-tax. A T-tax! Now look at us. Are you with me?
Gather your armies.
Mr. Barber, that's quite an ad. Let me ask you, what the first part struck me is I would impeach him. Well, who would you impeach him for what? Which president?
It's not necessarily intended for a president. We would have said the president if that's who we intended. It's a metaphor to the fact that we don't seem to want to hold our leaders accountable. We've got leaders that are doing illegal acts. They're not representing the people. And we don't seem to want to use the tools that are there, impeachment's one of them, to hold them accountable.
Well, they've committed illegal acts. What are they? Which presidents committed illegal acts? We've had the progressive income tax since 1913. Have all the presidents since then been committing illegal acts?
Again, you just look back over the years. There are several who have been caught for tax fraud, tax evasion. You've got the potential offering of Democratic candidates not to run in replacement for possible high-level offices. There's a lot of stuff out there, and if any of it's found to be true, we should hold those people accountable.
Well,
absolutely.
Sure. I want to go through what your ad says. You stand by the ad, of course.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about the progressive income tax. Would you like to replace it?
Absolutely. I'd love to replace it with the fair tax.
And you'd like to get rid of the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, which created it back in 1913. Get rid of the whole thing.
Absolutely. I think it's counterproductive to our economy.
Okay, sure. You want to get rid of the income tax, period. Not just a progressive income tax, but any kind of direct tax, income tax. Is that right? And go to an indirect tax, some sort of ad valorem VAT kind of tax. That's what you want to do?
I think the science is there, the data is there to show that a consumption-based tax is far more productive for a society and far more fair.
Okay, we get rid of the income tax, period. What interest, or rather, what sales tax rate on top? Here in D.C., we pay 8%. What would you add to that as a national sales tax? What percentage of sales?
You wouldn't be adding any tax. The fair tax is a replacement for all the embedded tax that's estimated to be in the products and goods and services that we have already because of our current income tax.
We have sales taxes all around the country, sir. In addition to the current sales tax we have in other states, you can't stop states from having sales taxes. So in addition to the sales tax, you would have a national sales tax, right?
Correct.
Okay, what rate?
In addition, again, it'd be replaced in the product and service. It'd be a replacement of the taxes that are already there. And you can't convene the local locations have to take care of their own tax.
You would get rid of the sales tax in localities.
You get rid of Social Security, capital gains. You get rid of Medicare, Medicaid. You get rid of the death tax. You get rid of.
Would you answer the question? What do you do about sales taxes in states like Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., all across the country? States have sales taxes. Would you get rid of those? And how could you do that constitutionally, denying the right of states to pay for their expenses? How would you do that legally or constitutionally?
You wouldn't necessarily do that. The states would have to choose in what way they want to tax on their own. I mean, that's their sovereign right. But I think they would follow the national standard.
Right. Everybody listening knows what's going on here. You're not answering the question. You want a national sales tax. What rate of taxation do you want in that sales tax?
The estimated tax that's already embedded in the goods is 23%. You would get rid of the embedded tax, replace it with the fair tax, and the states would then have to choose how they want to tax beyond that.
Well, in the states that I live in, it's about 8%, so we'd add 23%, so we'd have a 31% sales tax. What would you apply that to? Food,
clothing? You keep
saying
add. You would not, again, you would not be adding a tax, Chris. You're putting words in my mouth. There's an embedded tax in every product and service that we buy today.
Okay, what about the local sales taxes? Would you get rid of those when you create the national sales tax?
No, you could not. The states and local communities have to choose whether they want to remain on a state sales or income tax or move to a sales tax. That'd be up to them to follow whichever path they want to do locally.
So what would a state that has an
But you start by setting the example at the national level.
Right. You set the example by having a national sales tax, and you think that's going to discourage states and localities from having sales taxes? It's going to duplicate
No,
it.
absolutely not. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of them that would shift away from an income tax, and they'd move to a consumption-based tax as well. And
well, we already have those sales taxes.
In the United States
Sir, you are advocating a national sales tax on top of local taxes, and everybody knows it. Let me ask you about this thing. You say the government can increase taxes today without representation. Don't you have a congressman? Don't you have a U.S. senator? Don't you have representation as a citizen?
What we have, and I think is universally agreed on at this point in time, we're going to see a result of which in November, is that we have misrepresentation, which is almost as bad as no representation. Our leaders today are not representing the views of the people, and you're going to see them pay that price in November when the elections come around. So
we don't have a representative form of government?
No, we absolutely do.
Well, you just said without representation, you're saying the people can raise taxes without being elected as representatives of the people. And the people who raise the taxes are the ones that have been elected as representatives of the people, including your congresspeople who represent you. Why do you keep saying this government is a tyranny?
Chris,
why do you keep saying we don't have
look at the forest through the trees.
Well, I'm only looking at your ad.
The 60-second spot.
You're talking about a George Washington character. You're talking about gathering an army against our own self-elected government. Not the British government, not a foreign tyranny, but our own self-elected government.
No, sir.
Yes. Look.
Washington
didn't say gather your armies.
It says gather your armies.
Against who?
Referring to.
Against whom?
Gather our political army. Our political army.
He doesn't say that.
Absolutely.
He's wearing a military uniform and he says, gather your armies, and you're saying that's a metaphor?
Chris, do you know what a metaphor is? Do you know what hyperbole is?
Well, it sounds like everything in your ads. Are you a metaphor for a guy running for office, or you're a real candidate? If you're a metaphor, I understand what you're talking about. But you're talking about, we have a government that doesn't represent us. We have a government that's a tyranny. We have a progressive income tax you want to place with a sales tax, and you won't even deny the right of states to continue having their own sales taxes, which add up to 31% sales tax. And I don't think anybody's going to vote for a 31% sales tax, sir, or a 23% sales tax.
Well, again, Chris, that's your ignorance with what I'm saying, because, again, it's not an addition.
Okay,
it's a
repeat it so I won't be ignorant. Repeat it, sir. Anybody who wants to look at this tape can catch it. 23%, you said. And I'm saying people are now paying 8% in many states and localities. That adds up to 31, and you don't like the arithmetic, but that's a fact. Isn't it?
Your arithmetic's bad. You're not listening to what I'm saying. Yes.
Okay, tell me again, what rate of taxation do you recommend for the national sales tax, the fair tax, as you call it? What rate?
It's not the rate. It's not the rate, Chris. It's not the rate. It's the fact you're saying we're going to add that. We're not. We're going to replace what's already there embedded that you don't see every day in your cost of goods with the replacement tax that's seen on the receipt now. And that's where a lot of folks like to sling mud and misrepresent the fair tax.
And what rate will be? And what will be the rate of taxation under the fair tax?
Again, it's estimated to be 23%.
Okay, now if I get hit with a national sales tax, no, it's not added on. It's not added on to the national income tax.
That's right.
But it is added on to all local taxes, right, sir? So we get on the same page here.
No, sir.
No, it's not added on.
Here's an example. You got a Coke. A Coke today costs $1. Today you pay $1. In that $1 is already 23% of taxes that we don't see. The difference is now that Coke's going to cost 77 cents, but you're going to see 23% of tax on top of that 77 cents to still yield a $1 Coke. And then you add your 8% sales tax locally on that. There's your correct analogy.
Okay, let me tell you what happens, sir, in the real world. We have a state tax. We have a federal tax if you apply one. That's 23 plus 8. That's 31%. It's cruel world. Arithmetic matters. Thank you for coming on. Have you ever been audited?
The fair tax has more research than...
Have you been audited?
Have I been audited?
Yeah.
My business has been audited, absolutely.
Why? What have you done to cause to be audited?
I didn't say I did anything to cause an audit. I just said it's a tool that can be used and has been used in the past.
Why were you personally audited?
We heard about it during the... I'm sorry?
Why were you audited?
I've had local government audit my business.
But why?
I'm assuming they wanted to verify everything was correct.
Well, what was wrong with your paperwork?
Nothing was wrong with paperwork. We actually had some of the best paperwork they'd seen for our industry.
Well, why were you audited? You never figured out why you were audited.
All right, you're splitting hairs here. Again,
No, I'm asking an open
to
question.
open up conversation,
Everybody
talk
listening
about
to
the
this
intrusive part of the government.
No, in your ad, you go after what you call malicious audits, and I figured you must have had some experience to use language like that. So you've been audited. How many times have you been audited?
Have you not heard about during the mortgage crisis when banks were told you they take the money or they're going to have to be they're going to be subject to audits, which are costly,
how many times have you been audited?
Whether they were actually done anything or not.
How many times have you been audited, sir?
I'm sorry. It's irrelevant. I've been audited once.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Barber, for coming on.